What's gaming, gamers? Today I've got a Prismatic Warlock build for you using the exotic Chestpiece Rime-Coat Raiment. This build will almost literally clear entire rooms of ads on its own without nearly any effort on your part. You'll also have access to Void's Devour buff for grenade energy and healing, Solar's Restoration buff for uninterruptible healing over time, and the Stasis Frost Armor buff for an increased 22.5% damage resistance to all incoming damage. But before I get into the video itself, I'd like to shout out our clan, the Tyrant Seraphs. If you're looking for people to play any content in Destiny with, ranging from ritual playlists and seasonal activities all the way to raids and Grandmaster strikes, feel free to join the Discord server. We welcome anyone no matter how new or seasoned you are, and all of us will teach encounters if you don't know something. If you're interested, hop into the Discord server and play some Destiny with us, the link is in the description. Now for the build itself, I'll start with a prescriptive build guide in case that's what you're looking for. Once I've done that, I'll go into detail about what each element of the build does, why I've chosen them, as well as any alternative options and their pros and cons should there be any. For the prescriptive setup, use the exotic Chestpiece Rime-Coat Raiment. For the subclass, use the Solar Song of Flame Super, the Healing Rift, whichever jump you prefer, the Solar Incinerator Snap Melee, the Solar Healing Grenade, the Stasis Bleak Watcher Aspect, the Void Feed the Void Aspect, Facet of Balance, Facet of Devotion, Facet of Hope, Facet of Purpose, and Facet of Ruin. For the Episode Revenant artifact, use the Rapid Impacts mod, the Hail the Storm mod, the Concussive Reload mod, and the Brain Freeze mod. For Episode Revenant tonics, use either the Potent or Refined Tonic of Stasis Crystallization. For armor stat distribution, I have 32 mobility, 100 resilience, 36 recovery, 100 discipline, 33 intellect, and 80 strength. For the armor's mod setup, on your helmet run 1 harmonic siphon mod and 2 heavy ammo finder mods. On your arms run 2 impact induction mods and 1 stasis loader mod. On your chest piece, simply run whatever resistance mods you need for the content you'll be running. On your legs, run 1 recuperation mod and 2 stasis weapon surge mods. On your warlock bond, run 2 bomber mods and 1 time dilation mod. For your weapons, in your kinetic slot, run the Liturgy Stasis Double Fire Grenade Launcher from Episode Revenant with the perk combination of Chill Clip and Rhyme Stealer. In your energy slot, run the BXR-55 Battler Solar Pulse Rifle from Dares of Eternity with the perk combination of Demolitionist and Incandescent. In your heavy slot, run the Salvation's Grip Stasis Grenade Launcher. With the entire prescriptive build now detailed, I'll get into describing the entire build, starting with the Rime-Coat Raiment exotic chest piece. Rime-Coat Raiment has the exotic perk Bleak Domain, which will firstly enhance your Bleak Watcher turrets. Your Bleak Watcher turrets themselves will have extended range, and when thrown, will summon 4 medium-sized stasis crystals diagonally to where it spawns. Additionally, these 4 crystals will respawn 15 seconds after the Bleak Watcher is initially thrown. Second, the Bleak Watcher turret itself will have a stasis storm projected in a circle around the turret. While standing in this storm, you'll be granted 1 stack of the Icicle buff every second up to a maximum of 5 stacks. While you have the Icicle buff, shooting an enemy will cause an Icicle to shoot at that enemy, dealing stasis damage to them and applying 50 slow stacks. Icicles can only fire once every 0.2 seconds, and upon leaving the storm, any Icicle stacks you have will remain fireable for 2 seconds before disappearing. Overall, Rime-Coat Raiment is a fairly in-depth exotic, but the important thing to take away from the description is that while standing near your Bleak Watcher turret, you'll deal more damage to enemies thanks to the Icicle buff. Now that you know what the Rime-Coat Raiment does, I'll get into the subclasses set up for this build, starting with the Song of Flame Super. Song of Flame is actually a very in-depth super, so I'll try to keep it simple here. Firstly, Song of Flame will augment your kinetic and solar weapons, granting you both radiant and scorching rounds. Furthermore, while in the super, you'll have a 90% damage resistance to all incoming damage, and any allies within 15 meters of you will be granted a 30% damage resistance. Additionally, those allies will also be granted scorching rounds on their kinetic and solar weapons, as well as a fixed 15% ability energy for all 3 of their abilities per second. Song of Flame also augments your grenade and melee abilities. Your grenade ability becomes a sentient flame wisp that detonates upon impact, dealing damage and applying 40 scorch stacks. If there's another enemy within 15 meters of the enemy impacted by the wisp, another wisp will be summoned to seek that enemy out. This can happen up to 3 times per use of the wisp. Your melee ability will become an enhanced Incinerator Snap, summoning 7 projectiles that each deal damage and apply 20 scorch stacks. As of the writing of this script, Song of Flame is affected by an unintentional ignition nerf. Igniting an enemy within 5 seconds of that same enemy having been ignited will deal 60% decreased damage down to a minimum of 97.33% decreased damage after 4 ignitions. This bug makes Song of Flame pretty bad itself for damage, but it can still clear enemies quickly and will provide you with a 90% damage resistance while active. I'll post a pinned comment in the comments section when this bug is fixed so you can tell if it has been when you watch this video. Onto your class ability, the Healing Rift will grant you 40 health per second while standing within its radius for 15 seconds. Furthermore, while at full health and standing in the Rift, you'll be granted an Overshield at a rate of 3 health per second up to a maximum of a 15 HP Overshield. The Healing Rift is chosen as you'll be standing relatively still a lot of the time with this build, and it'll provide you with consistent healing over time so long as you're within its radius. Furthermore, it'll serve to refund you grenade energy via the bomber mods on your bond, but I'll talk more about that specifically when I go over the armor mods later in the video. For your melee ability, the Incinerator Snap melee will summon 5 burning sparks that travel forwards a short distance and have light tracking. These sparks will each deal damage as well as applying 20 scorch stacks. This means if all 5 sparks hit the same target, that target will instantly ignite. Incinerator Snap is chosen as it's the fastest recharging melee ability out of all the Prismatic Warlock melees, meaning you'll be able to use it most often to deal damage, gain light transcendence energy, and grant yourself grenade energy via the impact induction mods on your arms. If you wanted, you could swap Incinerator Snap out for basically any of the other melee abilities, but the Snap fits really well into this build's combat loop and deals light damage, which this build lacks significant sources of. Onto your grenade, the Healing Grenade will apply the Cure ×1 buff instantly to any ally within 7.5 meters of the grenade's impact, healing them for 60 health. Furthermore, at the grenade's location of impact, it will summon a Restoration Orb that lasts 7.5 seconds. Upon collecting this Restoration Orb, you or allies will be granted the Restoration ×1 buff for 4 seconds. The Healing Grenade is chosen as it has the shortest cooldown out of all the grenades, on top of being a great source of instant burst healing if you end up needing that. As this build uses the Bleakwatcher aspect, Bleakwatcher will change your grenade's base cooldown to 121 seconds no matter what grenade you have chosen. But what Bleakwatcher doesn't do is change the ability scaler of your chosen grenade. What does that mean? Well, the faster your base grenade recharge rate is, the more energy you'll be granted for that ability from weapon perks like Demolitionist, exotic weapons like Traveler's Chosen and Tessellation, buffs like Devour, and armor mods like Impact Induction and Grenade Kickstart. For this reason, the Healing Grenade's base cooldown of 91 seconds gives it the best ability scaler out of all the available Prismatic Warlock grenades. A little side note, I am thinking of making a video discussing all of the ability scalers and how they affect and are affected by different things in the game. If that's a video you'd like to watch, please let me know in the comments. Speaking of Bleakwatcher, it's the first aspect to run for this build. Bleakwatcher will allow you to hold your grenade input for 1.3 seconds to convert your chosen grenade into a Bleakwatcher turret. The turret itself will last 25 seconds, and during this time will shoot a burst of 5 projectiles over a duration of 0.7 seconds every 2 seconds. Every projectile will deal damage to the enemy hit, as well as applying 20 slow stacks to them. Furthermore, damage caused by the Bleakwatcher itself will count as Stasis grenade ability damage for the purposes of those fragments and armor mods that require it. Lastly, Bleakwatcher comes with 3 fragment slots, making it fantastic for build crafting. Bleakwatcher is a must-choose aspect as the entire build revolves around it. Rime-Coat Raiment buffs the Bleakwatcher turret, and in order to be able to use those buffs, you'll have to have the aspect equipped. The second aspect to run is Feed the Void. Feed the Void will cause any ability kill, frozen enemy shatter kill, volatile explosion kill, or tangle kill to grant you an enhanced version of the Devour buff for 10 seconds. Upon activating this enhanced version of Devour, you'll be instantly granted 200 health, which will fully heal you. While this Devour is active, any kill you get, regardless of how it's acquired, will grant you 200 health, an amount of grenade energy dependent on the tier of enemy killed, and will add 5 seconds to the buff's timer up to its maximum of 10 seconds. Unfortunately, Feed the Void only grants 2 fragment slots, but that's outweighed by the Devour buff itself. Feed the Void is chosen as Devour is a fantastic buff for this build. Not only will it keep you at full health so long as you're getting kills, but it will also serve to grant you significant amounts of grenade energy, allowing you to throw as many Bleakwatcher turrets as you want. As I mentioned, Devour inherits your chosen grenade's ability scaler, so having the Healing Grenade chosen will allow every Devour kill you get to grant you more grenade energy than it would with any other grenade. Onto the fragments. Firstly, Facet of Balance will cause the rapid defeat of enemies using light damage to grant you a base 10% melee energy, and the rapid defeat of enemies using darkness damage to grant you a base 10% grenade energy. For this build, after ability scalers have been applied, rapid light damage kills will grant your Incinerator Snap 9% energy, and rapid darkness damage kills will grant your Healing Grenade 8.75% energy. This build will be getting rapid darkness kills constantly with the Bleakwatcher turrets themselves and with shattering stasis crystals and frozen targets. You won't be getting too many rapid light damage kills unless your Incinerator Snap causes an ignition or your Song of Flame super gets kills, but the bonus energy for your Incinerator Snap is a nice benefit to have on top of the grenade energy gains. The second fragment, Facet of Devotion, will cause the killing of enemies afflicted with any darkness debuff to grant extra light transcendence energy. Darkness debuffs include Stasis Slow and Freeze, as well as Strand Sever, Suspend, and Unravel. Rank and file enemies killed while afflicted with a darkness debuff will grant an increased 1% light transcendence energy, elites will grant an increased 3%, and any enemy classified as a mini-boss or above will grant an extra 5% light transcendence energy. Furthermore, Facet of Devotion comes with a 10-point boost to your strength stat. Facet of Devotion will be helpful for this build as you'll rarely be dealing light damage, making its transcendence gains much harder to come by than darkness. You'll also be applying stasis debuffs to nearly every enemy you kill, meaning you'll be granted the extra light transcendence energy constantly. The third fragment for this build is Facet of Hope. Facet of Hope will grant you a 60% boost to your class ability's recharge rate while you have any elemental buff applied to you. As long as you have any one of these elemental buffs, you'll be granted Facet of Hope's extra 60% class ability generation. Facet of Hope will be helpful for this build as it'll help to lower the Healing Rift's long base cooldown. The Healing Rift itself is a fantastic utility for keeping yourself alive when standing in your Bleakwatcher's Stasis Storm, and itself will grant grenade energy when you cast it, meaning having it off cooldown more often will allow you to grant yourself grenade energy more often. Fourth for Fragments is Facet of Purpose. Facet of Purpose will cause the collection of any orb of power to instantly grant you a super affinity matching buff for a duration of time specific to the buff itself. Facet of Purpose also comes with a 10-point deficit to your recovery stat. As this build uses a solar super, upon collecting an orb of power, you'll be granted the Restoration ×1 buff for 5 seconds. While Restoration ×1 is active, you'll constantly regenerate 35 health per second. The Restoration buff's healing is also uninterruptible by damage. Unfortunately, Restoration's 35 health per second healing doesn't stack at all with your Healing Rift's 40 health per second. However, while standing in a rift, you generally won't be collecting orbs of power, so having Restoration granted on orb pickup simply makes moving around nearly as safe as standing within your Healing Rift. Lastly for Fragments, Facet of Ruin will cause the shattering of frozen enemies or stasis crystals to deal a second damage instance, increasing the damage caused by every single shatter that occurs. Furthermore, it'll increase the radius of your ignitions by 20%. Facet of Ruin also comes with a 10-point boost to your mobility stat. Facet of Ruin is a great fragment for this build as it'll be shattering frozen enemies and stasis crystals often, and will also be causing ignitions every once in a while. Its boost to shatter damage will cause your Bleakwatchers to be that much more effective, and its boost to ignition radius will allow your ignitions to kill more enemies when they happen. With the subclasses set up now detailed, I'll get into the artifact mods to run if you're watching this video during Act 1 of episode Revenant. Firstly, the Rapid Impacts mod will cause damage with your equipped grenade launchers to grant you a stack of the Rapid Impacts buff that lasts 5 seconds. After 5 seconds have elapsed within which you haven't dealt grenade launcher damage, all of your accumulated Rapid Impact stacks will disappear simultaneously. Each stack of the Rapid Impacts buff will grant you an increase to the reload speed stat and a decrease to the reload duration multiplier of any grenade launchers you have equipped. Rapid Impacts will be great for this build, as the Prescriptive weapon setup has this build running 2 grenade launchers in the form of a Liturgy and Salvation's Grip. Dealing damage with either of them will increase your reload speed stat for both of them, allowing them to deal more damage over a shorter period of time. Next, the Hail the Storm artifact mod will cause the shattering of any stasis crystal to release 5 homing shards in a star pattern around the crystal, each dealing damage and applying slow stacks to the enemy hit. While you have a Tonic of Stasis Crystallization equipped, the Hail the Storm artifact mod will be boosted, causing the shattering of frozen enemies to deal 12.5% more damage. As of the writing of this script, it seems as though the damage boost is bugged regarding stasis crystals. At the moment, while you have a Tonic of Stasis Crystallization equipped, your stasis crystals will deal 12.5% decreased damage. Third, for artifact mods, the Concussive Reload mod will cause damage dealt to bosses and champions, or the destruction of a combatant's shield to apply the Void Weaken debuff to that enemy for 20 seconds. While the Weaken debuff is applied to them, that enemy will take 15% more damage from all sources. While you have a Tonic of Weakening Void equipped, applying the Weaken effect via the Concussive Reload mod will automatically reload your stowed weapons. Concussive Reload will simply allow your Liturgy and Salvation's Grip to apply Weaken to bosses and champions, increasing your damage output onto those weakened enemies significantly. Fourth and finally for artifact mods, the Brain Freeze mod will cause frozen enemies to project a slowing fog around them that applies slow stacks to enemies that don't already have a stasis debuff applied to them. Brain Freeze will also cause any weapons you have with the Dark Aether Reaper origin trait to deal 6% increased damage to any frozen enemy. Brain Freeze will simply increase your stasis slow applying potential, as the Bleakwatcher itself can only track one target at a time. When it does eventually freeze an enemy, that enemy will project a slowing fog, slowing enemies nearby it. This is helpful not only for crowd controlling more enemies, but also the Facet of Devotion fragment specifically. As Brain Freeze causes more enemies to be afflicted with a stasis debuff, you'll be granted more light transcendence energy overall. As for the episode Revenant tonic to use with this build, either the potent or refined Tonic of Stasis Crystallization should be brought for its buff to the Hail the Storm artifact mod. As I mentioned earlier, Hail the Storm's boost to Stasis Crystal damage is seemingly bugged and is reducing the amount of damage shattering a Stasis Crystal does. This will affect your overall crystal damage. In most content in the game, this won't be an issue, but if you are pushing higher difficulty content, it might be best to avoid the tonic until this issue is fixed. I will, however, leave information in a pinned comment in the comment section if or when this bug is fixed, as once it is, you should always have this tonic equipped. With episode Revenant mechanics now detailed, I'll get into the armor's setup for this build, starting with the armor's stats. In the top 3 stat grouping of Mobility, Resilience, and Recovery, spec into Resilience first, with Recovery second, and Mobility third. Resilience will be by far the most important stat to spec into for this build. Every tier of Resilience you have will slightly increase your total amount of health, as well as increasing your base overall damage resistance to all incoming damage. At tier 10 Resilience, you have a maximum of 200 health and a significant 30% resistance to all incoming damage. As such, prioritize getting Resilience to tier 10 above all other stats. The damage resistance is incredibly helpful for survivability. Recovery will be the second most important stat to spec into in the top 3 stat grouping, as it dictates both the delay between your health regenerating as well as the rate at which your health regenerates. Furthermore, Recovery is the Warlock's class stat, meaning every tier of Recovery you have will decrease your class ability's base cooldown. While Recovery is a great stat, I personally don't spec into it at all with this build. For healing, I have the Enhanced Devour buff, the Healing Rift and Healing Grenade, as well as Orbs of Power, which will grant the Restoration ×1 buff and will heal 70 health instantly thanks to the Recuperation mod on my legs. As for the Healing Rift's cooldown, Facet of Hope does all the work regarding that one for me, so I don't have to worry too much about the Rift's cooldown. As that's the case, I use points I would have spec'd into Recovery for other stats. Third in the top 3 grouping, Mobility simply increases your walking, strafing, and crouching movement speeds, as well as your initial jump height, which are all things this build has no use for. I wouldn't recommend going any lower than 30 mobility if you can avoid it, as having less than 30 could lead you to miss particularly long or high height jumps. However, don't go any higher than 30 either, as they'll just be wasted on mobility. In the bottom 3 stat grouping of Discipline, Intellect, and Strength, spec into Discipline first, with Strength second, and ignore Intellect altogether. Discipline dictates the base recharge rate of your grenade ability. Your grenade's base recharge rate doesn't affect any active ability energy gains, it only affects the base passive cooldown of the grenade itself. This build will be actively generating lots of grenade energy frequently, which will supplement Discipline nicely, but having Discipline as high as you can get it ensures it'll recharge quickly when moving between encounters or if you can't actively generate any grenade energy in the moment. Strength will dictate the base recharge rate of your melee ability. Similarly to Discipline, your melee's base recharge rate doesn't affect any active ability energy gains and will only affect the base cooldown of the melee ability itself. This build won't be generating nearly as much active melee energy as it will be grenade energy. However, it also doesn't require the use of the melee ability as much, and as that's the case, you don't need to spec as heavily into Strength. Lastly, Intellect is altogether unimportant for this build. All Intellect does is lower the base cooldown of your super. It does nothing besides that, so don't even bother putting any points into Intellect. Keep it at tier 3 if you can, as that will ensure your super's cooldown isn't any longer than its base, but try not to go any higher than tier 3 either. With Armor's stat distribution now detailed, I'll get into the Armor's mod setup for this build, starting with the Helmet's mods. Firstly, the Harmonic Siphon mod will cause rapid solar weapon final blows to summon an Orb of Power. Orbs of Power are useful for this build, as they'll grant you health both via the Recuperation mod and the Restoration buff granted by Facet of Purpose, as well as granting you Armor Charge and Super Energy. Restoration and Recuperation will both grant you health whenever you pick up an Orb of Power, making them helpful for this build's survivability when not within a healing rift. Armor Charge will be important for this build to increase your Stasis weapons damage thanks to surges, and having your supercharged more often will allow you to deal with large groups of adds, majors, mini-bosses, and bosses more efficiently, more often. Next, the 2 Heavy Ammo Finder mods together will cause your weapon final blows to increase a hidden counter that upon reaching 100% summons a brick of heavy ammo. The amount of ammo a Finder brick will grant you depends on the amount of Finder mods equipped. As this build uses 2 Heavy Finder mods, every Finder brick summoned will drop an amount of ammo equivalent to 66% of a normal heavy ammo brick. This noticeably increases your heavy ammo uptime and in turn your Salvation's grip uptime. Onto the arms mods, firstly, the 2 impact induction mods together will grant you 14.875% healing grenade energy instantly upon dealing damage with your powered melee attack. Impact induction does have an intrinsic 7-second cooldown, meaning you can only be granted this grenade energy once every 7 seconds. However, this isn't an issue as you'll never have your incinerator snap off cooldown more than once every 7 seconds anyways. Next, the Stasis Loader mod will increase the reload speed stat by 10 points and decrease the reload duration multiplier of any stasis weapon you have equipped. This is simply a quality of life mod and will work in combination with the Rapid Impacts mod to increase the reload speeds of both your Liturgy and Salvation script grenade launchers. As for your chest pieces mods, simply running whatever resistance mods you need for the content you'll be running will suffice. For general low-level content, I usually just run one Arc, one Solar, and one Void resistance mod. But when running higher difficulty content, or any content with a threat modifier, I will change my resistance mods accordingly. In higher difficulty content, it's smart to think of what enemy type you'll be fighting against, as they'll generally have one or two main sources of damage. An example is the Vex. Vex have significant void damage sources such as the Laser Harpies, Major Goblins, Minotaurs, Wyverns, Cyclopses, and Hydras. As that's the case, when going into an activity wherein you'll be fighting Vex, bring two void resistances and one of a separate damage type, usually Arc due to normal Harpies and the Vex milk pools. The same goes for threat modifiers. Run two resistance mods that correspond with the activity's threat modifier, and run one separate resistance mod of a damage type you know you'll be subject to. For your legs mods, firstly, the recuperation mod will grant you 70 health instantly upon the collection of any orb of power with no cooldown. Recuperation is fantastic for survivability and will work in tandem with Facet of Purpose to make orbs of power effectively the same as your healing grenade. Next, the two Stasis Weapon Surge mods together will grant your Stasis weapons a 17% boost to their outgoing damage so long as you have any stacks of armor charge. This is a significant increase to your outgoing damage in all content in the game and will work to help you dispatch higher health enemies in higher difficulty content more efficiently. Lastly, for armor mods, on your Bond, the two Bomber mods together will grant you 17% grenade energy instantly upon casting your Healing Rift. Bomber will simply help you throw more Bleakwatcher turrets, which is what this build is designed to do. Next and finally, the Time Dilation mod on its own will cause any decaying stacks of armor charge you have to last 15 seconds instead of their base of 10 seconds. This is a 50% increase in each stack's duration and will both allow you more time to deal damage with your stasis surges while you have armor charge, as well as giving you more time to collect orbs of power. If you wanted, you could swap out one of the Bomber mods in favor of a second Time Dilation mod. This would decrease the amount of granted grenade ability energy upon casting your Rift from 17% to 10%, but would increase the duration of each stack of armor charge from 15 seconds to 18 seconds. If you find yourself struggling to keep your armor charge active, having two Time Dilations will help you to ensure it's active more often. With the armor setup now entirely detailed, I'll get into the weapons I recommend using with this build. I'll first go over my prescriptive setup for specific weapons, and while I'm doing that, I'll give more generalized recommendations that should suit players who don't have specific weapons, specific roles, or just don't like using a certain type of weapon. In the kinetic slot, I use the Liturgy Stasis Grenade Launcher from Episode Revenant with the perk combination of Chill Clip and Rhyme Stealer. This is actually a curated role. Ido will just give you one of these for free as you're doing the seasonal story, so you don't have to farm for the role specifically. If you accidentally deleted yours, you can complete the story on a separate character to have Ido give you the curated role again. Liturgy with this role is helpful for multiple things. One is a special grenade launcher which will deal decent damage to majors and elites, as well as applying the weaken debuff to champions, bosses, and enemies whose shield you've broken thanks to the concussive reload artifact mod. Next, the Chill Clip perk will cause any enemy hit with the grenades themselves to have 50 slow stacks applied to them instantly. This allows you to apply a stasis debuff to enemies to proc the Facet of Devotion fragment to grant you more light transcendence energy, as well as helping your Bleakwatcher turret freeze enemies faster. Third, the Rhyme Stealer perk will cause the shattering of any stasis crystal or frozen enemy to grant you a stack of the Frost Armor buff for 9 seconds. Frost Armor can stack up to 5 times with this build, and at its max of 5 stacks will grant you a 22.5% damage resistance to all incoming damage. Its duration can't exceed 9 seconds, but can be extended to this 9-second maximum indefinitely, so long as you shatter crystals and frozen enemies with the grenade launcher consistently. Fourth, it benefits from the Brain Freeze artifact mod as it has the Dark Aether Reaper origin trait, and will deal 6% increased damage to any frozen target so long as you have Brain Freeze equipped. This simply makes it easier to proc Rhyme Stealer. Fifth and finally, Liturgy has the Dark Aether Reaper origin trait, meaning it can overflow its magazine to 2 shots whenever you come into contact with the Dark Aether charge it generates. This will allow you to effectively instantly freeze any enemy with the weapon, as Chill Clip applies to both shots, each applying 50 slow stacks to the enemy hit. All of those benefits make Liturgy with this role a fantastic weapon for use with this build, and I highly recommend using it. However, there are alternative options if you don't have the role, can't acquire it, or otherwise don't want to use Liturgy. As for those alternative options, there are the Deliverance Stasis Fusion Rifle from the Vow of the Disciple raid, the Lingering Dread Stasis Grenade Launcher from the Duality Dungeon, the Lost Signal Stasis Area Denial Frame Grenade Launcher from the episode Echoes, the New Pacific Epitaph Stasis Wave Frame Grenade Launcher from the Ghosts of the Deep Dungeon, and the Riptide Stasis Fusion Rifle from the Crucible Weapon Pool. In the energy slot, I run the BXR-55 Battler Solar Pulse Rifle from Dares of Eternity with the perk combination of Demolitionist and Incandescent. BXR with this role will do a few things. It will grant you grenade energy via the Demolitionist perk every time you get a kill. It will apply the Scorch debuff to enemies nearby ones you kill via the Incandescent perk, causing them damage over time. and is a solar weapon, so will generate orbs of power with the Harmonic Siphon Helmet mod. Furthermore, BXR-55 is craftable and is from the Dares of Eternity activity, making it a simple weapon to farm the pattern for. Demolitionist is the most important perk to have, so if you don't have BXR with Demolitionist, don't have the 30th Anniversary DLC, or otherwise don't want to use BXR, there are a few alternative solar primaries that can roll Demolitionist. They are the Borrowed Time Solar Submachine Gun from the Gambit weapon pool, the Heliocentric QSC Solar Sidearm from the Worldjot weapon pool, the No Survivors Solar Submachine Gun from the Ghosts of the Deep Dungeon, the Nullify Solar Pulse Rifle from the Salvation's Edge raid, and the Zowli's Bane Solar Hand Cannon from the King's Fall raid. In the heavy slot, I run the Salvation's Grip Exotic Stasis Grenade Launcher from the Beyond Light expansion. This weapon is fantastic. It summons plenty of stasis crystals which all deal increased damage thanks to the Facet of Ruin Fragment and the Hail the Storm artifact mod. It freezes enemies with its crystals, granting you light transcendence energy thanks to the Facet of Devotion Fragment. If you have its new catalyst, it will have the Rime Stealer perk, meaning every stasis crystal and frozen enemy you shatter with the weapon will grant you a stack of Frost Armor. And, as it's a grenade launcher, it will benefit from both the Concussive Reload and Rapid Impacts artifact mods to weaken bosses and champions, as well as increase its own reload speed. All of these reasons make Salvation's Grip a fantastic weapon for use with this build, and I'd highly recommend getting it and using it if you can. Everything Salvation's Grip does makes it non-substitutable for any other weapons in the game, but if you don't have the Beyond Light DLC and can't get Salvation's Grip, I'd simply recommend running a DPS weapon in your heavy slot. Any DPS rolled legendary grenade launcher will work with this episode's artifact mods, or you could run exotic weapons like Dragon's Breath, Leviathan's Breath, Microcosm, or Whisper of the Worm to get high DPS as well. Now that I've detailed the entire build, I'll get into a few tips and tricks I have for use with this build. Firstly, if there are enemies around, throw as many Bleakwatcher turrets as you can generate. Freezing and shattering as many enemies as you can will help you clear rooms faster and more efficiently, and will also help to keep you alive because there simply won't be any enemies to kill you. Also, don't be afraid to use your grenade as a healing grenade, especially if you already have a Bleakwatcher turret active. You'll be generating plenty of grenade energy with this build as it is. Devour, Facet of Balance, Impact Induction, Bomber, and the Demolitionist weapon perk will all serve to grant you grenade energy whenever you need it, but you can't use any of those if you're dead. So heal yourself with the grenade if you need that instant burst of cure and restoration, because you'll be able to generate another grenade incredibly quickly. And that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or constructive criticisms, please leave them in the comments. I read all of them and reply to all that I can. If you'd like to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing. Lastly, if you'd like to join our clan, the Tyrant Seraphs, or simply play some Destiny with us, you can learn more about that by joining our Discord server. The link for that is in the description. Again, thank you for watching and have a great day.